Zeroth Spire Academy didn't just attract the best minds in the galaxy, it bred them. Telepaths, silicon intellects, hive-bound analysts, species that saw humans as primitive curiosities, tolerated only as a political gesture. So when 15 Earthborn students stepped off the shuttle, everything got quiet. So when 15 Earthborn students stepped off the shuttle, everything got quiet. Among them was Ravenna Kale. She didn't speak much. She didn't smile either. Jet black hair cut short. Uniform pressed. She moved like a blade sheathed in skin. Some assumed she was military. Others thought she might be one of Earth's engineered thinkers. The truth was stranger. She watched, listened, sat in the back row of lectures, said thank you in 3 alien dialects, but never once made small talk. She had this stillness, like the eye of a storm. Most of the alien elite saw her as beneath them. Zeroth Spire had never been touched by Earth's chaos. That was about to change. Zevzar Thon noticed her first. Heir to the Sil Crystal dynasty. Brilliant, vain, and born with a telepathic bandwidth that stretched across light years. In his culture, intelligence wasn't just status, it was sanctity. And Earth, in his mind, was a smear on the galaxy's data tapestry. He watched Ravenna with increasing disgust. She didn't compete. She didn't even argue. She just existed, like a riddle nobody had solved yet. And that was the insult. How could something from a planet classified Deathworld be allowed in a temple of logic? His friends joked about the humans, whispered things like, "How long before one of them snaps?" Or, "Bet they can't even process fifth-dimensional math." Ravenna just took notes, but every day something shifted. A quiet tension built up in the halls. Because while humans didn't dominate the social charts, they didn't fold either. And the aliens started noticing something unnerving. The humans never seemed afraid. Not of the gravity shifts, not of the neural simulations, not even of the Sil Crystal aristocrats who could shatter a mind with a thought, especially not Ravenna. She was always still, always quiet, but her eyes, they saw too much. And in those first few weeks, even before she spoke a word that mattered, a feeling began to spread across campus like static in the air. Something dangerous had arrived, and it wasn't loud. It was listening. The assignment was a mind breaker, a quantum paradox tangled in 11 dimensions, theorized centuries ago, and abandoned by most galactic minds as unsolvable. They called it the Hilvarin loop, a spatial recursion that folded back on itself endlessly, defying the laws of entropy and causality. Zeroth Spire assigned it to challenge, not to solve. Ravenna read it once. Then she asked a question no one expected. Have you ever modeled it using Earth's chaotic weather systems? The room paused. Zevksar blinked, confused. The other students smirked. A few giggled. Earth weather? Seriously. This was high-dimensional math, not storm watching. But Ravenna continued, quietly. Tornadoes don't resolve linearly. They fold patterns. Behaviors emerge from what looks like noise. If you map the entropy of the Hilvarin loop onto Earth's superstorm data, you get a pattern. The professor asked her to explain. She did, in frightening detail. Described pressure inversions like space-time folds, pattern overlap like particle tunneling. Explained that the loop wasn't a loop, it was a spiral, a living one. recursively stable because it never repeated exactly. And then she did the unthinkable. She solved it. On the hollow screen, the answer unfolded in fluid fractals. It moved. It adapted. The algorithm didn't just work. It explained why the loop had appeared in the first place, a natural phenomenon in quantum environments. Predictable. Once you stopped thinking like a machine. No one spoke. Not the hive analysts. Not the crystalline minds. Not even Zevzar. The silence wasn't awe. It was something worse. Something more primal. Fear. Because in that moment, a room full of beings who had ruled academia for centuries realized something horrifying. Ravenna Kale, from the Killing Planet, had just untangled a mystery that had outlived empires. Zevzar stared at her like she'd spat in a sacred pool. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. His culture believed intellect was inherited. A divine thread passed from ancestor to heir. But Ravenna didn't inherit this. She found it in storms, in chaos, in something no one else even thought to look at. And in that moment, something in Zevzar cracked. Not just pride, faith. The Academy didn't clap. It didn't celebrate. Because when Deathworlders solve problems, you thought only gods could touch. What else are they capable of? Zevzar couldn't sleep. He tried meditation, crystal resonance therapy, even bioloop memory cleansing. Nothing helped. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, Ravenna, standing there in her pristine uniform, calmly speaking chaos into order. And worse, he saw how she made it look easy. His people believed intelligence flowed through crystal memory lines, passed down from noble ancestors. You weren't just born smart, you were born worthy. Zevzar had been told since childhood that his mind was an instrument of destiny. Ravenna shattered that. So, he started researching. He requested access to Earth records, dug into her Academy performance, tried to find inconsistencies. Surely someone like her had cheated, stolen, copied anything. But the more he read, the worse it got. Her scores were perfect, not just in logic, in physical training, survival scenarios, strategy, xenolinguistics. She wasn't just gifted, she was terrifyingly competent across every field. She'd studied under Earth's Neural Warfare Academy, completed something called pattern survival training at age 17, and had been flagged as a high-value civilian asset. Zevzar tried to show the data to others, hoping they'd be alarmed. Instead, some of them were impressed. She might be post-adaptive, one said. Earth is like a forge, another whispered. Pressure makes monsters. Or miracles. That was the tipping point. Zevzar's frustration collapsed into obsession. He shadowed her in class, monitored her conversations, set academic traps, subtle contradictions, intellectual red herrings, none of which worked. She saw them all, dodged them with calm precision. He even tried a psychic probe once. All he got was static and a nosebleed. Ravenna never retaliated. She didn't raise her voice, didn't mock him. That's what made it worse. Because every time she walked past, unmoved, unreadable, he felt smaller. And that's something the heir to a crystal dynasty could not tolerate. He began to hate her, not out of logic, but panic. Because if Ravenna was just the first wave of what Earth could produce, what did that mean for the rest of them? What did it mean for his future? And what was a galaxy built on mental hierarchy supposed to do? When the apex minds came from a planet where everything wanted you dead? When Zevzar challenged Ravenna to a logic duel, the Academy buzzed like a hive poked with heat. These events weren't rare, but this one felt different. Everyone knew it wasn't about the puzzle. It was about dominance. Either Zevzar would reclaim his throne, or Ravenna would publicly end the illusion. The duel was broadcast live to over 200,000 students and faculty across the galaxy. 3 complex theoretical constructs. Each challenger had to analyze, deconstruct, and propose a working model under time pressure. Normally, it was a contest of finesse and speed. Ravenna never rushed. She studied the first problem, then asked a single question that reframed it completely. The crowd murmured. The moderator paused. She solved it in one clean movement, so elegant it hurt to watch. Zevzar fumbled, recovered, but the damage was done. Second problem. She didn't just answer. She pointed out a contradiction buried in the logic's foundation. A mistake, ancient and accepted, tied to the crystal ascendancy's core principles. It wasn't just a correction. It was a quiet demolition. Zevzar froze. He tried to fight back, but with every word, his responses grew more defensive, his posture tighter. She never once raised her voice, never looked smug. She didn't need to. Ravenna wasn't trying to win. She was trying to reveal. The third and final challenge involved consciousness modeling, defining how self-awareness emerges from neural systems. The Sil crystal lineage had built entire philosophies around it. Zevzar launched into a long, intricate explanation rooted in his culture's neural purity doctrine. When Ravenna's turn came, she smiled. Small, precise. Your model assumes sentience must arise from order, she said. But the universe doesn't start ordered. It starts chaotic. So if consciousness is a survival mechanism, shouldn't it thrive in noise, not clarity? She didn't wait for applause. She just sat down. The duel ended. The moderators declared Ravenna the winner by overwhelming margin. Messages poured in from across scientific worlds. Professors asked for her data. Military think tanks quietly took notes. Zevzar didn't speak, not for hours, because it wasn't just defeat. It was the knowledge that his entire intellectual inheritance had just been peeled open and shown to be fragile. And she'd done it kindly. That was the part that cut deepest. It happened in the corridor outside the Logic Theater. The duel was over. Ravenna had returned to silence, and Zevzar, shaking, humiliated, stood waiting. Students passed by, giving him wide space. No one dared speak. He had been the golden mind of the Sil Crystal dynasty. Now, just another footnote in Ravenna Keel's rising legend. When she stepped through the doors, he moved to block her path. You think this is over? He hissed. She didn't blink. I think it never should have started. Something in him snapped. The slap rang out across polished crystal walls. It wasn't just loud, it was symbolic. A royal gesture of ownership, dominance, rejection. His palm struck her cheek. Her head tilted slightly with the motion. That was it. Everything went still. She looked up. Something ancient and feral passed through her eyes. Not anger, not fear, calculation. Her hands moved before most could process it. 3 precise strikes, one to the side of his knee, collapsing his stance, one to his sternum, forcing breath from his lungs, and the last, a flat palm to the jaw that didn't just hit, it restructured. His face folded in on itself like soft metal. He hit the floor in silence, convulsing once, then still. Ravenna stood over him, breathing steady, her hands lowered. She said nothing. Every sensor in the hallway had captured it. Every student watching live screamed or gasped. Some ran. A few stared in horror. Security forces arrived 30 seconds later. Ravenna raised her hands, calm, no resistance, no explanation. The footage was reviewed within the hour. It showed everything. Zevksar struck first. Her response, fast, brutal but measured, was self-defense. Still, the images exploded across galactic channels. Screen grabs of Zevksar's broken face went viral. The debate was instant and polarized. "She's a danger," one newsfeed said. "She's a warning," said another. "Deathworlders don't escalate. They finish." Alien psychologists speculated on Earth's threat profile. Politicians issued statements. The Academy released a formal response citing protocol adherence and restraint. But none of that mattered to those who saw it live. Because what shook them wasn't just the violence. It was how automatic it had been. Like she'd done this before. Like she knew how to end a fight before it ever truly began. And suddenly, everyone remembered what Earth was. Not a world of thinkers, a world of survivors. The Academy went on lockdown, not because of the violence itself. Zeroth Spire had seen duels get physical before, but this time was different. This time, the system wasn't sure what to do with what it saw. Security questioned Ravenna for hours. She didn't argue. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She gave a clear, calm account of the events. The footage backed her. The strike had been fast, her counter faster, but not excessive. Every move had a purpose. No cruelty, just efficiency. Still, the damage was done. Zevksar was in critical condition. His jaw shattered, his neural relay damaged, his legacy fractured in front of billions. His father, the high ascendant of the Sil Crystal dynasty, demanded charges, demanded punishment, demanded order. But the laws didn't agree. The Academy's protocols, ancient and neutral, ruled it as a justified act of defense. Barely. So they compromised. Ravenna was placed on temporary academic hold. Not expelled, not punished. Just paused. For optics. The media? It exploded. Half the galaxy screamed that this was proof humans were savages, that they didn't belong in civilized institutions, that they brought war to libraries. The other half? They watched the clip on repeat. Not for the violence, but for the calm, for the precision, for the fact that when hit, Ravenna didn't roar. She didn't threaten. She neutralized. And she didn't finish him. She stopped when the threat was over. That scared people more than anything. Because a brawler is easy to understand, but a creature that fights only when necessary and wins with surgical grace, that's something else. Talk shows buzzed with analysis. Military strategists quietly forwarded reports. One admiral simply wrote in her briefing, "This is what happens when you mistake silence for safety." The council debated further sanctions. None stuck. Legally, Ravenna had walked the line. Ethically, she had remained cold steel. Back at the academy, whispers filled the halls. They say she didn't even flinch. She trained on a planet where kids dodge apex predators on the way to school. I heard she was designed. None of it mattered to Ravenna. She stayed in her room, read, waited, because she knew something the rest hadn't figured out yet. This wasn't about law or punishment anymore. It was about hierarchy. And the moment she hit back, the old order began to shake. The academy didn't hold a disciplinary hearing. They summoned a tribunal. This wasn't about one slap, one broken jaw, or even the legality of Ravenna's response. This was about something bigger, something older. The unspoken structure that had held the galaxy in place for centuries. The hierarchy of minds. The tribunal chamber was carved from sentient stone. 12 species presided. Telepaths, empathic judges, logic machines. Together, they claimed to represent balance. What they really represented was fear. Ravenna walked in without escort. The lead elder, a crystalline thinker known as Velzar, addressed her directly. "You are not on trial for violence," he said. "You are on trial for disruption." She tilted her head. "That's not a legal term." "It is now." The tribunal didn't ask questions about her technique or motive. They asked why she was here, what her presence meant, whether her kind respected the structures of shared thought, whether humans, creatures from the only known Deathworld in the Galactic Accord, could coexist without reshaping everything they touched. They tried to read her mind. Light psychic probes, gentle pushes. They hit walls. Solid neural shielding, custom-built. The kind Earth developed after first contact, designed specifically to block telepathic influence. It didn't hurt the reader. It didn't push back. It just refused. "You hide your thoughts," one elder accused. "No," Ravenna replied. "I protect them. That's different." They pressed harder, called her evasive, arrogant, a threat to peace. Ravenna finally leaned forward, voice soft. "You're not afraid of my violence," she said. "You're afraid I don't need it to win." Silence. "You can't predict us," she continued, "so you call us dangerous. But all I did was survive a blow I didn't ask for. And in doing that, I exposed how fragile this whole structure is." The tribunal recessed. Behind closed doors, the elders argued, not about her guilt, but about precedent. If they condemned her, it meant humans weren't allowed to be strong. If they cleared her, it meant the old systems were no longer absolute. They returned hours later. Verdict: no sanction, no expulsion. Ravenna left the chamber with the same calm she entered. No celebration, no smile. But word spread. Earth had stood trial before the galaxy, not with emotion, not with weapons, but with will. And the galaxy blinked first. While the tribunal wrestled with politics and fear, something else unfolded, quietly, dangerously. Ravenna's solution to the Hilvaran loop had been picked up by the Galactic Theoretical Network, a forum where only the most complex discoveries were vetted. And it passed review. Her findings didn't just untangle a paradox. They exposed a layer of space-time no one had seen before. A quantum echo plane where entangled particles could resonate across infinite distances. Instantly, the implications were colossal. Instant communication across galaxies, no lag, no relay. The war councils of 3 separate starfaring civilizations filed immediate inquiries. Meanwhile, scientists scrambled to model it. If Ravenna's equations were right, the echo plane wasn't just theoretical, it was functional. And worse, it was accessible using Earth-developed chaos prediction algorithms. Ravenna had unlocked a new layer of the universe. And she'd done it not with hypercomputers or ancestral wisdom, but with ideas born from thunderstorms and pressure systems. That terrified people. One empire labeled it strategic instability. Another issued a quiet order for a background probe into her Earth-based mentors. But one group didn't wait. A message came through dark channels. She's a destabilizer. Silence her before others follow. The assassination attempt was subtle at first. Surveillance loops altered. Access routes rerouted. A hall normally filled with traffic suddenly empty. Ravenna didn't blink. She'd seen it coming. What the plotters didn't know, what the entire academy had ignored, was that Ravenna wasn't alone. Every one of the 15 human students on campus had been screened by Earth's Defense Command. Everyone was trained. When the would-be assassins moved, they vanished. No screams, no warning, just silence, like they'd never existed. The next day, a simple message was sent to Academy security. It came from Marcus Chen, another quiet human who rarely spoke. Protocol activated. You tried to kill our thinker. No names, no threats, just facts. The Academy's leaders panicked, not because of the act, but because of the message beneath it. Earth protected its minds, not with laws, with predators. And suddenly, the Academy realized something far more chilling than Ravenna's brilliance. She wasn't an outlier. She was the priority. And Earth wasn't here to compete. It was here to reshape the game. The Academy buzzed with denial. Rumors spread like neural fire about the failed assassination, the missing operatives, the silent message from Marcus Chen. Officials claimed no breach had occurred, no attack had taken place. But too many people had seen too much, and none of the human students were speaking. They didn't brag, didn't posture, just kept attending classes, quiet, observant, like nothing had happened. That scared people more than any weapon, because now it was clear. Ravenna wasn't just a lone genius. She was part of something coordinated, something disciplined, something Earth hadn't announced, it had simply enacted. Zevzar's dynasty called an emergency council. They demanded action, intervention, retribution. But even their allies hesitated. Who do you threaten when your enemy responds without heat, without anger, only precision? Marcus Chen became a symbol overnight. The phrase, protocol activated, echoed across chat boards, intelligence briefings, even late-night talk shows. No one could confirm what it meant, but everyone understood its implications. Earth doesn't escalate. It prepares. Security forces dug deeper into the human student files. They found redacted entries, military experience, psychological conditioning, joint training in hostile environments. None of it illegal, all of it designed. Why send soldiers to a school? A psionic advisor asked. Because knowledge is war, someone replied. It finally dawned on the other species that humanity had never intended to simply participate in galactic society. They were probing it, studying it, not to destroy, but to understand. And then, maybe, to survive it better than anyone else. The assassination fallout reached the Galactic Council. They demanded a review. Earth responded with one document, Ravenna's solution to the Hilverin Echo, with annotations for military application redacted. The message was clear. You tried to erase a mind that could have changed everything. And Earth won't let that happen again. Some saw it as arrogance. Others saw it as maturity. The cold clarity of a species forged in extinction cycles, where every breakthrough had to be defended as soon as it was born. At Zeroth Spire, students walked around the humans differently, not in fear, in recognition. They weren't visitors anymore. They were something else, something harder to categorize. Something that had come not to conquer, but to outlast. Zevksar's father arrived in person. High Ascendant Zelthon of the Sil Crystal Dynasty didn't send a delegation. He stepped into the Academy's central plaza himself, flanked by enforcers in ceremonial armor. Not for defense, just symbolism, power made visible. He came for war. The tribunal had failed. His son was broken, and his empire's intellectual supremacy was publicly humiliated by a Deathworlder. That wasn't just dishonor, it was collapse. He requested an audience with Ravenna. They met in a room made of silence, psychically neutral, soundproofed, monitored only by recorders. Everyone expected demands, threats, a legacy clawing back its place. Instead, Ravenna offered tea. She poured it calmly, didn't smile, just asked him a single question. What would your son have done if he'd won? Zelthon hesitated. Proven his place, he finally said. Proven the hierarchy holds. Ravenna nodded. And what did I do when I won? He couldn't answer. She didn't gloat, didn't claim dominance. She simply taught, solved, survived. Then she gave him an offer. We'll share our data, she said. The human pattern algorithms, the quantum modeling, the whole structure, free, under one condition. He leaned forward. You end this blood feud. Publicly, step down. Not in defeat, but in recognition. The room held still. It wasn't blackmail. It wasn't even leverage. It was diplomacy. Zelthon saw it then. Her strength wasn't in fists or algorithms. It was emotional precision, tactical empathy. She knew what his dynasty really feared, irrelevance. And she offered something more valuable than legacy, a path forward. He agreed. He stepped down within the week, citing philosophical realignment. The galaxy was stunned. One of the oldest dynasties surrendered status without a war, without a speech. And in return, human models of adaptive cognition began circulating through elite academies. Quietly, efficiently, they changed everything. Not by replacing the old ways, but by revealing how limited they'd always been. And as for Zevsar, he left the academy. Rumors said he entered private therapy on a moon cloister. Others claimed he was rebuilding, studying Earth philosophies. No one really knew. But what everyone did know, now more than ever, Earth didn't just produce survivors. It produced architects. And Ravenna Kale had just redesigned the galactic future using the simplest weapon of all: a conversation. The Academy changed. It didn't make an announcement. There was no ceremony, no dramatic rewriting of its doctrine, but everyone felt it. The metrics shifted. The entrance trials stopped emphasizing lineage and focused on adaptability. Real-world problem-solving replaced inherited algorithms. The shift had a name, whispered at first, then spoken openly: the Kale model. Ravenna didn't campaign for it. She didn't even acknowledge it. She just showed up to class and took her seat at the front, this time as an instructor, and began teaching what Earth had long understood. Intelligence wasn't static. It was reactive, evolving. Her classroom was filled within days, not just humans, but beings from across the galaxy, telepaths, silicon minds, hybrid thinkers, all drawn to the strange gravity she carried. She didn't lecture. She posed problems, built simulations. Sometimes she just asked questions that made people pause for hours. She ended every class the same way: survive the question, solve the world. It became a motto. Her style was frustrating for some. There were no clear rubrics, no answers written in crystal. But those who stuck with her began to see differently. They didn't just learn how to solve equations. They learned how to challenge the framework the equations lived in. Her old rivals. They watched from a distance. Some came to her quietly, seeking guidance. She never turned them away. One former skeptic, a psionic indexer named Halvin Dre, later said, "I feared she would destroy what we built. Instead, she helped us see what we missed." The ripple effects spread fast. Other institutions adopted her approach. Entire sectors of galactic science reevaluated old models. It wasn't chaos. It was evolution, ordered not by blood, but by resilience. What stunned the galaxy most was the way Ravenna handled her growing influence. She never chased it. She stayed grounded, answered questions like a peer, not a prophet. She gave interviews only when needed, turned down awards, and redirected attention to her team of students, most of whom were former critics, now fiercely loyal. She wasn't trying to build a legacy. She was just doing what came naturally to a human raised where every day might kill you, finding patterns in the storm, and teaching others how to read the sky. 6 months later, the Galactic Council held a summit to discuss the Hilvaran Echo and its implications. Delegates arrived from all corners of space, some out of curiosity, others out of fear. A communication system that could bypass time and distance. That wasn't just science. It was strategy, revolution, risk. They expected a think tank. They got Ravenna Kale. She stood before them, dressed in simple black, no entourage, no ornamentation. Just a single data pad and that steady gaze. She didn't open with equations. She opened with a story. About Earth, about chaos, about how, for generations, her people learned not by mastering order, but by surviving disorder. How storms didn't follow laws. They tested instincts and how the greatest lessons came not from what stayed the same, but from what changed, adapted, bent without breaking. Then she made her point. Intelligence isn't linear, she said. It doesn't move in one direction. It branches, spirals, collapses, and reforms. She explained how their models of evolution, of logic, of consciousness had been based on stillness, but Earth had taught her something else. Survival creates feedback. Feedback creates pattern. And patterns, they're alive, recursive, fractal, like us. She paused. Humanity didn't rise because we were the strongest, or the fastest, or even the smartest at first. We rose because we kept solving. A silence settled over the hall. Then the questions came, dozens of them, not attacks, curiosity, debate, hope. Some asked for her full model. She shared it. Others asked about its military risk. She didn't flinch. It's a risk if you try to own it, not if you share it. By the end of the summit, something had changed. New alliances began to form, not around dominance, but shared adaptability. Smaller species proposed open learning coalitions. Former rivals exchanged data openly. And Ravenna? She stepped back. Let others speak. Let the model grow without her name stamped on it. Because she wasn't trying to be remembered. She was trying to show the galaxy something it had missed in its quest for control. That the most powerful force in the universe isn't certainty, it's curiosity. And somewhere on a faraway Deathworld, where storms still rage and old instincts run deep, a new generation learns not to fear the question, but to become it.